You wake up tired, not because you did too much, because you already know where the day is going. You get dressed, you leave, you walk back into a job you do not even like. And the strange part is not that it makes you unhappy. The strange part is that you keep going back. No one stops you at the door and asks why. You badge in, you sit down, you open the same windows, you begin again. That is what makes this kind of unhappiness so hard to notice. It fits inside routine. It arrives on time. It answers emails. From the outside, the answer seems obvious. If you do not like the job, leave. If it drains you, change it. So why do so many people stay? Because a job is rarely just a job. It is a schedule, a rhythm, a shield against chaos, a way of proving that your life is still moving in a direction other people can recognize. By the time you say you hate your job, the job may already be doing much more for you than paying you. That is why leaving can feel harder than staying. Not because staying feels good. Often it does not. But because pain you already know can feel less dangerous than a future you cannot yet describe. You can see this in small moments. A person complains about work every week, dreads Monday every Sunday, feels their mood change during the commute, imagines quitting in the middle of the day, then still renews the same life again in the morning. This can look like weakness from a distance. Up close, it is usually something else. The body does not judge situations by meaning alone. It also judges them by predictability. A known stress can become easier to carry than an unknown possibility. Even if the job is dull, humiliating, or quietly exhausting, it has shape. You know the people. You know the timing. You know what kind of bad day can happen there. You know how to survive it because you already have. The alternative is often vague. Not a better job already waiting. Not a graceful transition with a clean story. Just a gap, a blank period, a conversation you do not know how to explain. Savings that may not last long enough. New rules, new faces, new risks, new chances to fail in public. The mind does not compare these options fairly. It compares a detailed discomfort with a fog, and fog can feel larger than pain. This is why advice from the outside often sounds thinner than it means to. Just quit. Start over. Follow what you love. Those sentences can be sincere, but they usually come after uncertainty has been converted into language. Before that point, change does not feel like a brave chapter. It feels like stepping away from a railing in the dark. Money is one part of this, and it is not a small part. Predictable income does something very powerful. It turns the future into something measurable. Rent has a date. Bills have dates. Groceries have a cost. Transport has a cost. Sleep itself changes when the basic structure holding those things together begins to shake. People often speak about miserable jobs as if the only thing trapping someone there is a lack of courage. But the paycheck is not just payment. It is permission to stay legible to the world. It keeps the lights on, yes, but it also keeps panic at a distance. Meaning matters, but meaning does not arrive every 2 weeks in numbers that can be counted. That does not mean everyone who stays is making a wise choice. It means the choice is usually heavier than it looks. Some people are not choosing between a bad job and a beautiful open future. They are choosing between a bad job and a period of financial exposure that their mind and body read as immediate threat. Once that pressure enters the picture, dissatisfaction becomes easier to postpone. You tell yourself a story that buys time. After this quarter, after the bonus, after the holidays, after the lease ends, after the next performance review, after things calm down a little. But work has a way of generating one more reason to wait. Stability can become a machine that keeps reproducing its own argument. Then something else happens. The job begins to attach itself to identity. When people ask what you do, they are rarely asking for a full description of your inner life. They are asking for a title, a role, a place inside the map. That answer becomes useful fast. It ends awkward silences. It reassures family. It signals progress. It lets strangers know how to position you. Even when you dislike the job itself, the role can still perform a social function that is hard to surrender. This matters more than people admit. A person may hate the meetings, the pressure, the manager, the numbness, and still feel relieved when they can say, without hesitation, what they are. Not who they are in a deep sense, but who they are in the ordinary public language of adult life. That sentence can become a kind of shelter. Leaving the job can threaten that shelter before it creates a new one. Suddenly, there is a difficult middle state. You are not fully this anymore, but not yet something else. And many people are less afraid of hard work than of that undefined space. The fear is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet and practical. What will you say at dinner? What will you tell your parents? How will you explain the gap to the next employer? What if the next move is worse? What if you discover that the dream was only tolerable as fantasy? What if you leave the role that made you miserable and find that you are leaning on it more than you knew? That last fear matters. A job does not only occupy hours. Over time, it rearranges the architecture around those hours. You wake because of it. You sleep around it. You plan your meals around it. You decide where to live because of it. Your weekdays take shape from it. Your weekends become recovery from it. Some friendships come from it. Some relationships survive by adapting to it. Even your exhaustion becomes scheduled. After enough time, your life is no longer sitting beside the job. It is built around it. This is why leaving can feel so disproportionate. You tell yourself you are only changing one thing, but your nervous system feels the wider truth. You are not removing one task from your life. You are pulling at a central beam. Many small habits, assumptions, and dependencies begin to move with it. That movement is frightening, even when the structure itself has been making you unhappy. People often expect pain to produce clarity. If the job is bad enough, surely that should make leaving easier. But human beings do not work that neatly. Prolonged discomfort can produce adaptation instead of escape. You learn the language of the place. You lower certain expectations. You become efficient at enduring. You stop asking whether this is good and start asking whether this is manageable. This is one of the quieter tragedies of adult life. A person can become highly skilled at surviving a reality they would never choose freely. And survival has its own rewards. Not joy, exactly. More like relief. You make it through the week. You get the message done. You avoid the conflict. You reach Friday. You order something nice. You sleep longer on Saturday. Then by Sunday evening, the mood begins to shift again. Not because something new happened, but because the body remembers what Monday costs. That pattern can repeat for years without collapsing, which is exactly why it becomes normal. Once something becomes normal, it stops presenting itself as a question. It becomes infrastructure. You do not wake each morning and reconsider every wall in your room. In the same way, many people do not consciously choose the life they are repeating. They inherit yesterday's choice and continue inside it. This is where outside judgment often misses the point. People say, if it is so bad, why not do something? But many people are doing something. They are coping. They are adapting. They are preserving income, preserving credibility, preserving routine, preserving the image of a life that still appears coherent from the outside. The cost is that their inner life begins to split. One part continues performing. Another part watches from a distance and keeps notes. This is the part that says, this cannot be it. This is the part that feels strangely sad on a random Tuesday at 11:17 in the morning. This is the part that notices how often exhaustion is being renamed responsibility. And yet that observing part is not always strong enough to move the rest, because the real trap is often misunderstood. It is tempting to think people stay because they love security more than freedom, but that frame is too shallow. The deeper issue is that work often becomes the place where security, identity, routine, and self-respect are all bundled together. Once that happens, leaving does not feel like changing jobs. It feels like dropping several fragile objects at once and hoping enough survives the fall. There is also a more intimate fear underneath all of this. A job gives your days an answer before you have to ask the question. You know where to be. You know what matters between 9 and 5, or whatever hours your life has been given over to. You know what counts as progress there. You know when you are behind. You know when you are done. Outside that structure, the freedom people romanticize can become unnerving very quickly. A blank day sounds beautiful until you are inside one without a plan, without a role, without evidence that you are still moving towards something recognizable. Then freedom can begin to resemble exposure. This is why some people remain in jobs they do not even defend. They are not convinced the job is good. They are convinced the absence of the job would reveal a terrifying amount of uncertainty, all at once. That is the twist hiding inside the whole problem. You may think you are afraid of losing income, and sometimes you are. You may think you are afraid of failing, and sometimes you are. But often the deepest fear is more disorienting than that. You are afraid of becoming undefined for a while. A title, even a disappointing one, can still organize your sense of self. It can answer the question of what your week is for. It can spare you from confronting how much of your worth has been outsourced to usefulness. Once that happens, quitting threatens something deeper than employment. It threatens the borrowed structure you have been using to feel real. This is why the first days after leaving a job can feel so strange, even when leaving was necessary. The inbox is gone. The calendar changes shape. The urgency disappears faster than the identity does. You may feel relief, then panic, then guilt for feeling relief, then shame for feeling panic. None of this means leaving was wrong. It means the job had roots in more places than you could see while you were standing inside it. And this reaches far beyond work itself. Look at how often people apologize for resting, as if stillness requires a defense. Look at how many conversations begin with being busy and end with being tired, but still carry a strange undertone of moral achievement. Look at the Sunday evening dread, the reflex to check messages late at night, the inability to enjoy free time without some pressure to improve it, monetize it, optimize it, justify it. These are not just habits of overwork. They are signs that productivity has begun to do emotional work that identity once held more broadly. If being useful becomes the main proof that you matter, then even a bad job can start to feel safer than open time. That is why so many people do not leave when outsiders think they should. They are not simply tolerating a bad role. They are protecting a whole arrangement of fear, structure, and social meaning that has fused itself to the role. And that is also why change cannot always begin with action. Sometimes it begins with a more uncomfortable form of honesty. Not just, this job is making you unhappy, but also, this job may be feeding parts of you that are now terrified to go hungry. It may be feeding the need for predictability, the need to avoid shame, the need to answer questions quickly, the need to feel acceptable in rooms where adulthood is measured through titles, promotions, and calendars full of obligations. Until you see that clearly, you may keep treating the problem as laziness, indecision, or lack of discipline, when in fact the real problem is entanglement. And entanglement is harder to solve than motivation. This is also why it can be completely okay that you have not changed everything yet. Not ideal, not painless, but understandable. Staying longer than you wanted does not automatically mean you are cowardly. Sometimes it means you are still trying to gather enough psychological and material stability to survive the transition without breaking something important. The danger is not that you have stayed. The danger is that you stay unconsciously, telling yourself simpler stories than the truth. If you say, I am just bad at change, you hide the actual mechanics of the trap. If you say, everyone hates work, stop complaining, you flatten your own life into a rule. If you say, one day, without asking what must be built before that day can arrive, you turn hope into sedation. But if you can see the structure clearly, something changes. You can begin asking better questions. Not just, how do you escape? But what exactly has this job been holding together for you? Which part is money? Which part is routine? Which part is fear? Which part is status? Which part is the simple terror of not knowing what to call yourself for a while? Those questions are less glamorous than dramatic quitting fantasies, but they are far more useful, because once the structure becomes visible, the exit no longer has to be mystical. It can become specific. You may need savings, not inspiration. You may need a smaller bridge, not a giant leap. You may need a different identity before you need a resignation letter. You may need proof that you can exist without constant external confirmation. You may need to grieve the version of adulthood you were taught to admire. And sometimes, after all that, you may still decide to stay for now. That can also be an honest decision. The important difference is whether you are staying asleep or staying awake. One keeps repeating the life automatically. The other sees the cost, sees the function, sees the fear, and chooses with open eyes while preparing something different. That is not the same as being trapped. It is the beginning of no longer lying to yourself about the shape of the cage. So, if you have ever wondered why it is so hard to quit a job you do not even like, the answer is usually not that you are lazy, weak, or secretly satisfied. It is that the job may have become a container for far more than labor. It may be carrying your income, your routine, your social readability, your fear management, and a temporary sense of who you are. No wonder the door feels heavy. If this tension feels familiar, it would be interesting to know which part is hardest to leave behind. The money, the routine, the title, or the fear of not knowing who you are next. And if this gave language to something you have been carrying quietly, you can stay near these videos. Tomorrow morning, you may still reach for the same key, but now you may finally see which door has really been keeping you there.